Welcome to another episode of EMF Warriors, a podcast where we share the latest research and cutting-edge information on everything to do with electromagnetic fields. Solution-focused interviews, including genuine real-life stories of people affected by harmful EMFs and how they have fully recovered from their debilitating symptoms. So sit back, relax, and get ready to enjoy another episode of EMF Warriors.
G'day listeners, welcome to the very first episode of EMF Warriors podcast. I'm your host, Jason Borden-Smith, and I'm so excited to be here sitting next to one person I just admire in terms of her work, her person, and what she's doing for our human family. Catherine Austin Fitz, how are you, and welcome to rainy Sydney for a change.
Always a pleasure to be in Australia, always a pleasure to be with you, and always a pleasure to be a part of EMF Warriors.
Thanks so much, Catherine. Yeah, we've come so far in such a short time, and the podcast is the new initiative, and we're very excited. Now, many people may be a little surprised that we're bringing a money manager, a financial advisor, on as our inaugural guest, but by the time we finish, they'll appreciate why we're doing this.
Okay.
So, your experience is not just deep, it's very broad. And what we're going to bring to the podcast today is not just the health effects, it's the health effects and the impact on the family budget, family income, and extending it out to other areas that are not talked about a lot. That's in relation to surveillance and control. So
Right.
we're trying to build the big picture, and we've called this episode Follow the Money.
Right.
Because you've done an incredible job of following the money over your life. And let's start with a bit of background, because a lot of people won't know who you are.
Well, I grew up in Philadelphia. Obviously, I'm an American, and I had a career. First, I loved business, and so I had a career on Wall Street that was very successful. I loved working on Wall Street. I decided as a very young person to follow the money. Money was my tool to make sense. Pretty early on, I understood that whatever the adults were saying, it wasn't really what was going on, So there was an official reality and there was a reality. And the way, as a child, that I could understand the reality was by unpacking the money. How does the money work on this? So it became my, and I decided very early on, my childhood neighborhood was destroyed by narcotics trafficking and mortgage fraud. And everybody kept saying, well, we have to do it because it makes money. And I thought, well, what is this money thing, and why is it building a world that doesn't make sense? Because if you looked at the total equity in a place, it was being liquidated. So you were making money, but you were shrinking total value. So it didn't seem to make economic sense. Anyway, so I went to Wall Street, and I didn't understand at first that to understand how the money works in one neighborhood in America, you have to understand how all the money in the planet works.
Well, that's a big step, going from a community to a planet.
Well, the way the money is organized, it's organized by different industrial sectors and by different markets. And the way government organizes its money is by different functions. And so if you're going to understand my little neighborhood in West Philadelphia, you have to understand the whole federal budget. If you're going to understand the federal budget, you have to understand the global capital markets, and there you have it. So, in a very centralized system, you have to understand the body to understand a molecule, and you have to understand the molecule to understand the body.
Gotcha.
Okay, so it's a relational understanding, and it's one of the reasons when I was on Wall Street, I would move from department to department trying to, if I just learn about this money. And finally, I got to the point where I basically covered all the different markets on Wall Street, and I realized, it's being rigged from Washington. So I went into the Bush administration as Assistant Secretary of Housing. One of the reasons was you have a very socialized financial mortgage finance system in the United States, and if you're gonna understand how the money works by place, neighborhood by neighborhood, the best way is through the real estate and the data about the real estate. And so
there's lots of stories you can tell about your time.
Right.
in the Bush administration. But we want to segue onto why you left and what made you start Hamilton Securities, which was your next venture.
Well, I left because the secretary kept ordering me to break the law, and I refused. It was very simple.
Pretty good reason.
Yeah, and it was really funny because at one point I had a wonderful person running the coinsurance program, and she kept implementing the law, and he called me in and ordered me to fire her. And I said, why would I fire her? And he explained exactly why. And I said, and this was a flat out lie. I said, well, I ordered her to do that specific transaction that way, so I can't fire her. And of course the secretary knew I was covering for her. And he looked at me and he said, at some point I'm going to have to fire you. And I said, yeah, I know, but you're not going to fire her. Anyway, so I left, but what had happened during the Bush administration is I had come to understand the power of what the internet could do, because one of my political problems was I managed to get an entire federal agency with 7,000 people working for FHA, computerized, online, and talking to each other. And the power of what happened in terms of the ability to build alignment within the organization and to dramatically improve performance was amazing. Because you had plenty of smart people in the bureaucracy, they just needed the tools, and they needed the air cover. They needed somebody who was willing to go to the mat and, not fire them. So that told me we have a technology that can dramatically increase the learning metabolism within a community, and that can dramatically change how you optimize equity investment within a place. It was very powerful. And so I decided to start an investment bank that used technology to dramatically impact not just the investment banking process internally, but how you went about financing real estate, mortgage markets, and places, and optimizing the investment in place. So the idea is you invest in a place, you do a series of things with the technology to improve the learning metabolism, the value of your investment goes up, and you get a profit.
Everybody wins, yeah.
Everybody wins. That was the basic concept when we started it. When you get into this kind of information technology, you get back to, okay, there's all this equity there to be unstuck. And part of the invisible war going on with the information technology that you talk about in EMF Warriors is who's going to get that pop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously you made quite a few enemies with this new approach of bringing the financial system down to a local level, rather so a bottom up versus a top down.
Right. And I always thought of myself as a lover, not a fighter. So I was not out to make enemies. But it was very interesting because I have no problem understanding, for political reasons, you might want to optimize things financially. So I don't put financial criteria first necessarily. What happened, though, was the Clinton administration decided, and one of the deputy assistant secretaries said to me, black people are hopeless. We're moving them out, moving Hispanics in. And a process began where they started to round up, using war on drug enforcement, literally rounding up innocent people and stuffing into private prison and making money on the prisons.
Wow.
And I considered what was going on, it was very duplicative of the way that Hitler went about the slave labor camps. And I knew that this was not true. In other words, I knew these people weren't hopeless. I knew, the whole scheme was a scheme to liquidate populations in a way that made money on real estate and gentrification. And that if you let it go down, this was a virus that would spread throughout the entire society. It was back to, are we going to be a human or inhuman civilization? And if government can so subvert the rule of law by bringing drugs into a neighborhood, rounding up innocent kids, running an entrapment, putting them in slave labor camps where they work for the Department of Justice, who has a for-profit company and markets them to DOD to make prison labor. I mean, not only were you genociding one population or using them as slave labor, but if you look at the impact to the taxpayer was going to financial prison. So the whole thing was so gruesome And I wrote it up in an online book, Dylan Reed and the Aristocracy of Stock Profits.
And how do people find that?
It's, I'm sorry you asked that because we're just changing the URL.
Okay,
now.
we'll post it in the show notes later on.
Okay,
with
it's
the new
Dylan.
website.
It's Dylan Reed and Co. Inc. or Dylan Reed and Co. is the new URL. If you go to Dunwalke, DUNWALKE, you'll skip to it. You'll get a reference. Anyway, but it'll be in the show notes. So
it's all documented. Like I've read Dunwalke.
right. It's all documented. Here's what you need to know. This process was very intentionally engineered at the same time they passed the 1996 Telecom Act.
Wow.
And the telecoms were instrumental in this whole process. And so there is a very intimate level between what the telcos and NSA were doing in terms of, intelligence within a place and how places and the financing of places were managed and the real estate.
Yeah, for those who don't know, that Telecommunication Act in 1996 basically stops anyone taking any action on the grounds of health, environment, and related issues against the telcos. So they've now got federal protection.
Right. And one of the reasons is if you look at the economic model, America breaks down to 3,100 counties, and political control is engineered by controlling each county bottom up. And so when they rolled out that plan, they were rolling out a plan that had to do with political control of the entire economy. It's not just about telecommunications.
Yeah, it's all interrelated.
Right.
That's why we're doing this show,
Yes.
so people get the
Yes.
big picture.
Yes.
So you did upset a few people, and you were subject to quite intense litigation and other matters, which we don't have to go into. But just describe that a little bit. Like, they came down really heavy on you.
We went through. Here's what happens. There's a great line in one of my favorite all-time movies because it's Russell Crowe, one of my favorite actors. I'm in Australia, so I can say that. In The Gladiator, where one of his gladiator pals, they're worried that he might be poisoned in the food in the gladiator camp, and one of his gladiator pals says, before they can kill you, they have to kill your name. Great line. And so what happened to me, because I look back at the government spent, my estimate was $45 million doing 18 audit investigations, 12 tracks of litigation, and all sorts of smear campaigns and physical harassment. I mean, it was a very immersive process and went on for 11 years, but so very, very expensive. And I kept thinking it's much cheaper to just kill me. And what I didn't realize is they needed to kill my name,
Right.
and they needed to kill my name. To kill my name, they needed to kill my field. And so the whole thing turned into a real spiritual warfare battle over, whether or not they could kill my field and name. It's kind of funny. And normally I'm not a fighter. And if you thought I would get involved in that much sort of enemy of the state litigation, Jason, I just got my heels dug in. It's one of the few times in my life I can be a very stubborn person, but it's hard to reach that point. And I just said, this is about everything. This is about whether we're free or we're slaves. And I'm not backing down on this because, my deepest training was to be loyal to the tribe. And I really thought, if you guys proceed with what you're doing, we will lose. We will lose the mandate of heaven, and we will lose. And we will lose globally in a very big way. We will lose in exactly the way I'm watching them lose right now.
Yeah.
And I said, you can't do that. You can't, the entire financial system depends on, and the whole Anglo-American Alliance superiority with food, with finance, with all the different things we have, if you blow that brand, we're sunk. I have a wonderful friend who at a conference once said, who here has seen the movie Enemy of the State? This woman played Will Smith in real life. So all I can tell you is Will Smith got it fixed right away, and it took me forever.
But it's important, I think, for the audience to appreciate that it wasn't just the money you were completely drained of. You were pretty much on your backside broke. Your health had been trashed.
Right.
You were really at the bottom. It took all of you to keep that brand, your reputation, and keep your integrity.
You have to come to the point where it was really funny because I was very wealthy and very successful, and but no one would believe that this was really happening until there was no money left to steal, and they were like, "Well, why are they still doing this if there's no money?" And that's it. That's when it started to turn. You literally had to go down to peanut butter and jelly to get people to realize what was up. It was kind of an educational problem. And so you had to go down to peanut butter and jelly. But the other thing you had to do was I had to be very clear that I valued my freedom more than my life. So you have to have a Spartacus moment. I don't know if you've seen the movie Spartacus, but it really has to be about, I have a lot of Scottish genes, as do you. But this is really about live free or die.
Yeah.
And you have to decide, am I gonna go along with being a slave, albeit a well-paid one.
And that's a great segue to move into where you are now.
Right.
Build up from below bottom, giving financial advice to a couple of clients. Is that where you started?
What happened was I had always promised myself I would never manage money, let alone be responsible to someone else for their money. And then what happened was I kept doing radio shows literally to stay alive and, to sort of publicize what was going on. And I started getting questions, and questions just grew and grew and grew. And people started to ask me, will you help me with my money? And the reality is that was where the market was. So I started to work as a financial advisor. And then ultimately my clients were asking me, I'd have 40 clients ask me the same question every week. Why did the president do this? And so I started a podcast just to respond to the clients' questions. And ultimately that grew into an independent business, which is now the Solari Report. But so I've done two things. One is serve as a financial advisor, mostly to families, and I'm totally focused on reducing family risk and building family well-being and net worth. And then the Solari Report. And now what we're doing is I'm evolving the financial advice into doing screens with money managers, because so many of my clients and former clients and subscribers say, how can I invest in the markets without putting money into the guys doing this? So now I'm doing what's called an ESG screen for the Solari World portfolio. And I think that's where this evolves and can go to real scale.
Yeah, we don't want to start giving money to people who are using it against us.
Right.
So it's a great service.
Right, we're financing the people who are killing us.
Yeah, that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
Now, Solari's been around for a while, Solari Report, maybe nearly a decade. Has it been that long?
Started in 2008. So next year, next December 2018 will be our 10th anniversary.
Yeah. And you've done literally hundreds of podcasts and interviews with a great number of different topics and people.
Including you.
Including me. And we'll get to the EMF stuff in a minute. But I want to just jump to it. While the Solari Report has a money market section pretty much every week, and you do have a large financial section of the reporting, you've brought in these other subjects that you would not expect a financial advisor to bring in. You've done shows on 9/11, you've done shows on chemtrails, you've done shows on, you name it, food, a whole host of things that really don't relate for most people to finance. But you say, no, it's all connected.
Right.
We need to understand the big picture.
Right. I was trained at the very high portfolio strategy level, and of course everything's connected. So it's just like it's one ocean,
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so everything's connected, and it wasn't until I went into the enemy of the state period and started working with reporters and other people that I discovered that they didn't think that way. They hadn't been trained that way. Now, my focus with my subscribers, my goal is my subscribers have a free and inspired life. That's what I want. And I want, I think of everyone as like a bird I'm trying to set free from the cage. And I want them to have a free and inspired life, which encourages and makes it easier for the next person to have a free and inspired life. So I want to have a free and inspired life in a way. So I want to make my money in a way that helps you have a free and inspired life, as opposed to making my money in a way that, puts you back in the cage.
And you call that return to network. So you're not making it just for yourself. You're making money for the company you're working with, but you're also making money for the community.
Right. So I want to have a positive return to myself and a positive return to the network. So I want to make my money by getting a piece of the value I create for others.
And I know so many people who think that can't be done. And you and I are living examples that that's not true.
It was really funny. In Washington, I used to run into so much trouble on this, because I would lay out the Solari model and I would have people get really angry and they say, you can't do that. I said, why not? Of course I can do it. I always have found that the win-win is there. But you will see cultures that are very stuck on win-lose energetics, and they're addicted to it. They're addicted to a win-lose. Part of it has grown up around the fact that the industrial economics really are win-lose, whereas the IT economics are win-win. So it's part of this is the economy changing.
I was going to spend a little bit of time on how your members take shows that you do with people like Nicholas Begich, I think he's... Begich, who wrote the book...
On harp.
Angels Don't Play With This Harp.
Right.
How do members take when you do the chemtrails, which obviously has some influence with EMF, with the ionisation of the ionosphere and the magnetosphere, and HARP, which is like was a research weather control kind of project that's now been weaponized, and these really big subjects. How do they handle that? They
take it very well. And in other words, there's an official reality and then there's reality. And for people who are used to the official reality, getting into reality can be tricky. One of the ways I've tried to sort of step them into reality is to constantly bring it back to what is reality doing to their family budget and their family risk. What happened to me, and this is in part answer to the question one before, as I started to work with people and their money, what I realized was they were putting way too much money in their brokerage account and far too little money into their health and well-being and skills. So the economy is changing and they're not keeping their skills updated because they're trying to put more money in their brokerage account, or you have people who are worth millions of dollars who say they can't afford organic food. Are you crazy? Do you know how dangerous it is to eat the kind of food you're eating? So I started to realize, okay, we have on our balance sheet, we have living equity and intellectual capital, which is not booked, but we have financial assets, which are booked. And we've got to rebalance the investment so that we at least make sure in the long run that we're optimizing financial wealth. So let me give you a couple of examples. If you have a severely autistic child, one of the Vax mothers, and I think she's right, estimates that it's going to cost you or someone present value $5 million.
Wow, that much?
That much. You can see a severely autistic child. First of all, one of the parents has to stop working and stay home. How much is that worth over 30 or 40 years? Okay, that's number one. Number two, you wreak havoc. There's no time to pay attention to the other siblings. So look what happens to them. Meantime, you need, whether it's doctors, diets, all sorts of stuff. You're talking about a spending treadmill, which is extraordinary, and usually it breaks up the family. Or many times it breaks up the family. So if you look at the financial repercussions of, which is more important to a young couple starting out, getting the right return on their savings or not having a severely autistic kid?
Yeah, that's obvious.
Okay, so that's one example. The second example is the number one reason I found in families having serious financial problems was health. Mm-hmm. So someone turns out to be electronically hypersensitive and they have to quit their job and they have to move off into and blah, 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 blah. So so there was a sub-optimization of investment of time and money in the living equity part of the balance sheet. That was number one. Number two, you were finding more and more communication problems between men and women, because the women would see what was going on that was wrong in the world because they were watching the living equity, and the men weren't seeing it. They were thinking it's fine, the market's up, what's the problem? And so in terms of their map of the world, which was critical to their long-term strategic planning and risk management, they weren't able to integrate the living and financial equity issues. But then when you got into the actual investment of the family budget and flows, they weren't able to see that. And so part of it was whether in the mapping function at the macro level or the budget allocation and resource investment, integrating the financial equity with the living equity. And there were so many misunderstandings, particularly between men and women on those subjects. And a lot of my work with clients is to get everybody in the family on the same page about how to do that.
So seeing we're talking health and living capital, I just want the listeners to appreciate there's more and more evidence coming out now that the electromagnetic fields we're getting from our technology are a primary cause for most modern diseases.
Right.
Dr. Martin Powell recently came out at a conference in the US last week, or a couple of weeks ago, and he now feels, while mercury and all the other chemicals play a role, the toxic load for a child is important. He now feels EMF is the number one cause of autism. He's on record. And this is the guy who discovered what they call the voltage calcium gated channels. So the mitochondria are screaming out for more calcium because they're getting, affected.
But if you look at the case studies, so one of my favorite videos from the VAX team is the McDowell triplets. Mm-hmm. So you have basically triplets all get shots in the morning, and by the end of the day, they're all autistic. So that would be something where there's something in the vaccines, but the EMF could be creating much more susceptible conditions.
Yeah, so their heteroplasmy rates, their mitochondrial, the mutant mitochondrial, are getting to such a level that when you introduce another external toxin, their system just can't handle it.
Right.
And this is what puts them on the spectrum. So we're not going to focus on health too much because we've got so many other podcasts coming up with so many great people, and I talk about health all the time when I'm being interviewed. I want to go through a little bit of a history and bring the money in where we can. Mm-hmm. So in the late 1800s, we had the AC-DC wars. This is between Edison and Tesla. And there was a battle over we're going to use the alternate current or the direct current. Now, the direct current is the natural electricity that we get from nature, whether it's the sun, it's our bodies, it's the earth. So DC is the current. And Edison wanted to use DC, but Tesla found a better way using AC. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Tesla, like many other people, but what I've come to realise is who was behind these guys. We had JP Morgan behind Tesla, and we had Westinghouse behind Edison. And I've got a sneaking suspicion.
Although at one point they switched.
They did switch, and I think there was a board-level deal done between the two.
Oh, really?
Where they all decided that now AC is much more efficient. We can have power stations and take the currents for literally kilometres, tens of kilometres in one direction or another, and whereas DC was much more localised. So I think they actually colluded. The money guys got together, and there was a documentary I watched the other day, and you could see Edison being rolled at a board meeting, saying, no, we're not using DC, we're using AC. So I think there was a collaboration between both those guys, and AC won the day. Now, the problem with using AC is that everything we've developed since has been using that power source, and that power source is totally foreign to our body.
Right.
Now, you've interviewed lots of people on EMF. Was it Blake Levette was probably the first?
Right, and then Sam on Dirty Electricity.
Yeah, Dr. Sam Milham. So we could go into that level, but I just want to go through the history a bit more. So in the 1900s, now we've got electricity, we're starting with the telecommunications. So we've got the old-fashioned line operators putting the lines and patching people in together. They started developing a series of of symptoms which are very consistent with what we see today with electrosensitive people. That was kind of the emergence of the telecommunication industry, and that has now gone to levels that I think are surpassing even the pharmaceutical industry in terms of.
It surpassed the Vatican.
Wow. So we'll get back to that. And then we moved into the kind of the war period, World War One, World War Two, and this is when the military guys really got stuck into all the electromagnetic fields. They started with radar, and then they went to all the radio transmissions, and that developed AM, FM radio. And then they got into, I think, a whole lot of weaponry that was never really released. It was more experimental. And it was probably one of the first documented cases I saw of this kind of weaponized EMF technology, apart from HAARP, apart from the actual directional weapons that we see today, was in the Moscow, in Moscow, where the U.S. Embassy had I think they called it the Moscow Signal was the episode, and they put some microwave and RF transmitters and antennas inside a clock and hid it in the U.S. Embassy, and wanted to see, I think they were probably using it for surveillance and other reasons, but they wanted to see what would happen to the workers there, because they knew that these RF signals and microwave signals were very detrimental.
Right.
It's actually...
Microwave ovens are illegal. They don't use them.
They're illegal. Microwave sickness is what they call electrosensitivity. So it's a medical condition. They have wards set up where there is just no fields whatsoever, so people get better.
Right.
The Russians have really taken the lead on recognising these issues, and also taken the lead on developing weapons, I imagine, as well.
Right.
So, just for people who want to look up that, it was a BBC documentary called "Opening Pandora's Box." You can find it on YouTube if you want to look into it.
And there were one or two ambassadors who died.
Well, I think they got extremely sick, and I think it was the wife of the ambassador who raised the alarm. So the Americans started their own projects I think it was in Oregon. I can't remember the name of the project now. And they started repeating these things. The US Navy did a massive amount of research and documented all the different effects in some papers that came out in 1972. These are all in our EMF Warriors library. You can have a look at them. So the military really got involved in this, and I think they've taken this technology to levels that are just downright scary.
Right. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with it. I spent a lot of time researching it in the 90s, but the military entered into a big memorandum of understanding with the Department of Justice in the United States in the early 90s for prototyping non-lethal weapons. And that began a process of very significant activities, we'll talk about some later, of this stuff being tested and used on an involuntary basis on citizens in the United States. Citizens reporting hearing messages in their heads and, all this kind of stuff, all evolving out of that investment.
Yeah, we'll get to that towards the end, because let's get into the modern day. And we had the big power lines coming through, and Sam's work on that in his book, which was called Dirty Electricity, I believe.
Dirty
and he was
Electricity.
showing leukemia outbreaks. He was an epidemiologist who did some amazing research on this area, and still today he's still so concerned, and I think a little bit frustrated that he's not getting heard as well as he should. So people can look into that book. We then had that power line come into our house, and that started the dirty electricity and the stray voltage. Again, all these AC currents flying through, and you get these signal noise ratios, and they start pulsating, and people, put a clock next to their bed, and they're getting affected from the fields from just an alarm clock, not to mention all the other devices. So it was bad enough back then. But now we've came into the telecommunication age where cell phones are now being used by children.
Right. We've
got tablets being used as pacifiers to keep toddlers occupied while mum goes off and talks to a friend on a phone.
Right.
It's just getting to a level now where I'm so deeply concerned that I started help with Scott and a few others started EMF Warriors, and coming out quite publicly, as we can hear. we don't have to go into deep into this, but my concern is the next layer of technology that is being rolled out as we speak. Smart meters are things that people are starting to experience now. I think the rollout, I'm not sure how far they are, but I think in countries like the US and Australia, they're nearly complete.
Right.
Nearly every house, because they sneak in. You're not at home, you're at work, and you don't even know you've got a smart meter.
Right.
And people are getting lots of different symptoms.
Right.
Tendonitis in their ears, and they're getting brain fog and heart palpitations and a host of other related EMF symptoms. And this has been done without any care, any approval, and just rolled out. Now, those smart meters are what I call the gateway for the household appliances to feed back to a central smart grid. That someone's getting that information. They're documenting all that data. So your kettle has an antenna which is telling the smart meter when you were having a cup of coffee, where your washing machine was being used, and every other appliance you have in your house that's bought today usually has some kind of RF or microwave signals coming from it. So we're going from about 7 devices, which we have today, to about 30 of these devices in the average home by 2022, 2025. So we're just getting surrounded by it. Now we want to take this technology to the next level. And this is the rollout of the 5G network.
The 5G.
And 5G stands for fifth generation. This is going to allow movies to be downloaded in 3 seconds. So you could have a 3 gigabyte file download in seconds. It's going to allow the rollout of autonomous vehicles. So the sensors on the cars can stop in time.
Right.
It's going to allow the electrification of a whole city. And I'm deeply concerned about it. And I've talked about it much before, so I don't want to go into too much detail. But what I want to talk about is, how does the money work with the rollout of this system, this control surveillance system?
Well, there are many different aspects to the money. The first is that you can automate certain things that dramatically improve productivity of that function. So, for example, if you've ever drone through the parking lot at the airport of a major city, what you will see is billions of dollars of capital sitting there doing nothing. Okay, and the environmental consequences of everybody having a car that's sitting there doing nothing for that long is serious when you look planet-wide, especially when you're considering mining to get the minerals we need to do that. We're now putting spaceships up to go mine asteroids. So at some point you say, isn't it easier to just automate the cars than go mine asteroids? And so in theory, if you look at the system of automated cars, you're going to bring down the number of accidents, you believe, and you're going to significantly lower the capital you need to provide, transportation to people through cars. And you're going to do it in a way where now they don't have to spend their time driving the car. They can do something else while they're, for someone like me, that's very significant time savings in a year. So they're looking at productivity, and one part of the economics is we can make this function dramatically more productive, and the people who achieve that get a lot of increase in equity value. Now, the problem is you put a lot of people out of work. So you're talking about a very significant transition there. So that's number one. Number two, surveillance. So you can learn a lot more about people and what they do and how they behave and what they want. It's called surveillance capitalism. And so somebody can be driving down the street in their automated car and going by a certain shop, and you can connect the dots to the fact that that thing they were looking for on the web 2 days before is right there and is available at a discount if they take this coupon and go in. Okay, so to somebody engaged in surveillance capitalism, they think they're optimizing your desires. But then finally, you have a way of influencing their behavior. So you have a way of communicating them both at the conscious level and the subconscious level that can start to influence their behavior, including in ways that are very unhealthy for them, both physically and economically.
So these digital systems that we're rolling out, I'm very concerned about their level of integrity. Like we've had whistleblowers coming out.
They have no level of integrity.
No, zero.
None, zero. So it's kind of interesting because if you look at the consumer markets, you have two tsunamis coming at each other. One tsunami is called cyber warfare, and the other tsunami is called the Internet of Things. And you have an extraordinary number of businesses reinventing their entire business model, their governance and management structures to bet the ranch on the Internet of Things, when in fact you have a cybersecurity wave coming in that says all the systems you're depending on to do the Internet of Things have zero integrity. And I keep watching these two tsunamis, Jason, and saying, how is this going to work?
Well, it can't. Like when two big waves, I spend a lot of time with the surf, and when two big waves come crashing at opposite ends, it's a mess. It's a massive current. There's eddies. There's whirlpools. And it's just going to be chaos.
Well, here's the thing. My attitude is I want to make sure my subscribers are not the dead surfers. So.
Well, and I want the EMF warriors to get ready as well. That's why we're talking here today.
Right, exactly. So that's the question. How do you make sure that your surfboard does not get taken down? Where's the opportunity? How do you avoid the risks of those two waves?
Now, is it like you and I both love technology?
Right.
We're putting our hand up saying, hey, we love technology, we love the efficiency, we love the productivity, and I'm sure we can make it safe. Like we could take these frequencies, either add some more frequencies or use ways of communicating that don't hurt our biology.
So let me come back to what you describe as quantum biology.
Yeah.
And I'll say this in my own lay term. We have a physical body, but we have an electromagnetic body.
Correct.
So we have a spirit, we have an energetic body, and our energetic body, in my opinion, communicates energetically with other living things, not just other people, but other...
Yeah, trees.
Right. And I believe there is such a thing as morphogenic fields so that we share intelligence through fields. And all of this stuff is like acid rain, playing crazy with those electromagnetic bodies and fields. And to me, if you're going to build great technology, you want to say, where is the technology that does not have a harmful impact on the physical body as well as the energetic body? And when you say does not have a harmful impact on the energetic body, it means does not have a harmful impact on the electromagnetic intelligence. Because our intelligence is, whether it's in our own electromagnetic field or shared with others in a morphogenic field, that's what is being, that field and its power to have a high learning metabolism is what is being invaded, manipulated, if not destroyed.
So a lot of people they struggle so much with the idea that these devices could ever be allowed onto the market to be used by children and have these detrimental effects, whether it be surveillance, control, or health, as we're talking about now. I want to play a little snippet from your interview with Sam Milham, if I can.
Okay.
And it's a story about one of his heroes, Sir Richard Dahl.
At every level, you're facing mountainous corruption. The media is corrupt, the state government is corrupt, the universities are corrupt, the hospitals. And some of my co-workers in this field, the epidemiologists, have been bought out by cell phone money, and it's kind of sad. And I'm so glad.
But I remember you tell the story of one expert. I forget what his name was. Sir Richard somebody.
It's Richard Dahl. He's one of my heroes. He got knighted for his. They did the original studies that showed smoking and lung cancer, the smoking lung cancer connection, and I'd met him, and been to his office in London, and I could never understand why he seemed to be on the other side of some of these issues until after he died. It came out that he was on the take from Monsanto for many, many years for big bucks, and that's, if you could buy him, you could buy anybody.
Now that's insightful. Sam's hero has turned around and joined the other team.
Right.
So a guy that was supporting the tobacco is now opposing all the EMF cases that he's been in court with, and it took till his death till the truth came out. So a lot of people just find that hard to believe. Now, you've seen financial fraud at Wall Street.
Right.
You've seen corruption at the most nearly evil level within governments and politics. I've seen science being corrupted, where all the poor scientists are only getting money from industry, so they're doing papers that support what they want to see.
Right.
It goes on and on and on. How do we help people understand that this is just not Jason and Catherine making this stuff up? This is very real, and governments would allow a cell tower outside of your window, and everyone thinks it's okay.
The way to understand how a system really works is to understand when a system refuses to learn in a positive direction, that will show you the real system and what the real goals of the system are. So, for example, in the United States between 1990 and about 3 years ago, the average life expectancy of a woman my age without a high school degree dropped 5 years.
Wow.
Okay. Now, what you can see from that statistic and what's happening now is there's no correction. And the reason there's no correction is it's intentional. When the federal government refused to craft a political solution that would balance the budget, the way to balance the budget was to lower the life expectancies.
My goodness.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's policy.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Now, it's quiet policy, it's not announced policy. But you see a whole series of things rolling out. And ever since the 1995 debacle around the budget, you've seen significant numbers of things roll out that are lowering life expectancy as an intentional matter. And if you look at the leadership in the United States that manages the real policies, so the deep state, they organize a lot of stuff around the life expectancy. And what they would say is, well, sure, Jason, EMF radiation lowers your life expectancy by 2 years, but this other thing we're doing is upping by 3 years. And if you look at the Social Security system, we really need to bring it down so it all nets out. Okay. And they look at that because, remember, in a highly centralized system where they believe it's not possible to tell the population the truth. And they also believe that the population is not capable of taking responsibility for themselves or the wider system. And as a result of that, you have a cycle of disrespect between the people and the leadership. And if you're in the leadership in that situation, so you don't control the system, but you have to manage in a highly centralized system full of double binds where the official reality and reality are very different. Ultimately, you have to make choices between two bad everything's choices between bad options. And so you end up making these very evil kind of decisions. So one of the things you'll see is the top layer of society is very afraid of the people. If you go back in history and look at, we're herd animals. And if you've ever worked with a group of cattle until, when they finally come together and get it into their mind to stampede, whoa.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you go back through the human history and see where they come together and they finally decide to turn and attack their leaders, the aristocrats get guillotined. So they're afraid of people. And it's one of the reasons in the secret societies, they're planning fools. They've got a 10-year plan, a 20-year plan, a 30-year plan, 50, and every little upsetness is a plan and another plan and whatever, because they don't want the herd to get together and stampede.
So this segues nicely into another very dark subject called mind control. Now,
Right.
this is one of your biggest concerns because
Right.
you've spoken privately about it.
Right.
Now, most people
My-
won't understand mind control, so we need to.
Yeah, my biggest concern about, because I think of intelligence, a human intelligence, as an integrated phenomena. You know, I have one intelligence, whether it's coming from my brain or my gut or my field or whatever. Ultimately, I'm an intelligence system and a living intelligence. And this stuff is all of it together is coming through my devices, and it's impacting my living intelligence. So let me go back to your history. At the end of World War II, since the Templars came back from the Middle East, they brought mind control back through the Crusades. Criminal hypnosis has been going on for centuries, but it was always sort of in the secret societies. What happened at the end of World War II, the Nazis really took mind control technology to a whole new level through the experimentation they did in the camps. And then the U.S. intelligence agencies brought those scientists and doctors back through Operation Paperclip, integrated it into the U.S. intelligence agencies and their think tanks and universities, and put an infinite amount of money behind it. And you took mind control to a whole new level. And we all know the stories of MK Ultra and those programs. But one of the things that has happened progressively is they have been able to take that technology and make it cheaper, faster, cheaper, faster, cheaper, faster. You have the same kind of reverse S curve. It's almost like Moore's Law does mind control. And what has happened is, my bet is, if you look at the kind of kids who are doing the school shootings, what in my generation took 1,000 hours to build the perfect assassin, you can now do with plenty of drugs in 10 hours. Or if it's 10 hours through their devices, they don't even have to go to summer camp. So the reality is that we have been able, through technology, to take mind control to a whole new level, whether it's the kind of brainwashing we've been doing with media, but now you're talking about electronic, technological means that can create addictions through electronic mechanisms. So at the Solari Report, we did a great Solari Report with Adam Trombley on entrainment technology, because I was running into so many situations where my clients were being sold investments using entrainment technology, and it was causing them to make completely irrational decisions. So I would have someone who wanted to buy silver at a 24% premium to melt value when they could buy it at a 2.5% premium to melt value. And I couldn't argue them out of it. They were just in a trance. I was like, wait a minute. Wake up. Because math is a beautiful thing. Math can really bust through a lot of mind control. But when it can't bust through, somebody wanting to pay a 22% premium for no reason, you've got a problem. Anyway, so Adam joined me for that. But we've been doing a series of book reviews, one on gambling, one on pornography. What I believe is they're using this technology to create addictions across the board. So pornography, different kinds of food, sugar, gambling, online virtual games. It's on and on. I think they're also doing it with online shopping and consumer, and TV shopping, the shopping networks. So literally the average person is going into their daily life or the marketplace, and they're being harvested with technology that is having a dramatic impact on their finances.
And I don't want to bring it up, but I think we have to. You've talked about on the Solari Report, you use movies a lot to explain what's going on because people can relate to it.
Right.
And one of the saddest stories you've told recently is that of The Kingsman.
Right.
Now, this is a movie that came out probably a year ago, and I'll let you tell the story because you tell it so well.
Well, Kingsman came out, and I picked up on it right away. I said, this is a problem. In the Kingsman technology, you have a billionaire, Silicon Valley billionaire, played by Samuel Jackson, who gives away free SIM cards. And once he's got everybody on his SIM cards, he starts prototyping technology that allows him to weaponize the population. You also see a similar thing in a movie called The Cell, which is equally dreadful. I find both. Anyway, but there's a scene in the first Kingsman, there's now a follow-up, where a member of the secret society, the Kingsmen, is in a Southern Pentecostal church with 200 people worshiping on a Sunday. Jackson revs up his SIM cards, and 200 people stand up and kill each other down to, the last man standing.
Oh, no, it's dreadful.
Who happens to be the Kingsmen. And so you literally watch 200 Southern Pentecostal worshipers in a Sunday church service kill each other in short order.
Now, that's a movie. But your concern is that it may be playing out in real life.
Well, as soon as I saw it, I said, because you never do these kinds of things unless you warn people you're doing them. Now, I believe they were doing them. If you look at Occupy, the Occupy movement, if you look at Arab Spring, if you look at the Hong Kong demonstrations, I've always believed that those were engineered with this kind of technology, that they were using entrainment kind of technology. But it wasn't until I saw the Kingsman, I said, wow, okay, this is how we get from what they're doing on Arab Spring to the zombie movies. This is how we get to World War Z. And we've just had an incident. So last year, we started to have 2 series of incidents which I felt were prototyping of the Kingsman technology. One was there's a private chain of restaurants, Chuck E. Cheese in the United States. I don't think they have them in Australia. And you started to see brawls breaking out in Chuck E. Cheese. And
these are children's kind of restaurants, aren't they?
But it's the parents who are, you end up with 20 or 30 parents all fighting.
And that's why I'm bringing it up, because you don't fight around kids.
Right.
So what are these? Yeah.
If you watch it, it's so Kingsman. It's just, to me, it's a no-brainer that it's a Kingsman. Well, there's another one. I'm going to be a little bit more gruesome for a second. And I'm saying this because it's important. I get back to family risk. It's important that you know that this stuff exists. If you watch the movie The Forgotten, which I got you to watch the other day, it shows you that the hardest bond to break in terms of field intelligence is between a mother and a child. And so it's very hard to mind control a mother to act against the interests of a child. There's a
mitochondrial tie.
There's a mitochondrial tie. And I was talking to a pastor in Tennessee about 5 months ago, and he was very sad. And I said, "Are you all right?" And he said, "No, I'm really not." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "I'm praying for a family, a mother, for no reason that anyone can understand, a young mother, just stood up one day and murdered her 3 children.
Oh, my goodness.
And I'm praying for the family, and, I have acquaintances who are involved in the community." And he said, but this is not a lone incident. There is an epidemic of these. So I got online and I checked, and my first thought, Jason, is they're prototyping whether or not they can do it.
And anyway, there's one more example that I know you want to talk about, and that's what's going on in universities.
Right. And so the latest example is Evergreen State College, which is a university in Washington that receives some government state subsidies. And you've just had a sort of an explosion of activism erupt on the campus coming out of what's called, I think it's called a Day of Reckoning, where traditionally the minority people would stay home for the day in honor of, their sense of oppression, et cetera, whatever. And this time around, they decided that the white people should stay home. So instead of a group of people voluntarily staying home, they were trying to order another group without their consent to stay home. And one of the professors objected that it was racist. Well, the next thing you know, he's being mobbed attacked, and the police are telling him that he can't come to campus because they can't guarantee his safety.
Wow.
And you have mobs of students, hurtling around the university, literally mobbing different faculty and mobbing the president. There have been several scenes of the president talking with them, and literally they don't talk like adults. It sounds like a Lord of the Flies mob.
Wow.
It's very debased, and the president is basically scared to death. And it's a very Lord of the Flies kind of scene, although there's no physical violence. There's physical intimidation and threats. And now we have legislation in the Washington State Legislature to pull $24 million of appropriations. Now, if you watch what's happening, it's inconceivable to me that this would be happening the way it's happening without that technology. I think there's a covert operations working it. And here's what's scary. The faculty, the professors, the president of the college, they don't realize the technology exists. They don't realize the possibility that this is a covert op manipulating the kids. Interestingly enough, when you watch what happened in Hong Kong, I am sure that the local government officials knew exactly that this was, technology being financed by Soros kind of groups, and they knew exactly the weapons they were up against. And it explains a lot of their extraordinary patience with the kids, because they understood the kids were the victims.
Wow. Okay, so we need to finish on a more positive note.
Well, let me just say one thing. If you're a parent and you're paying $30,000 to $60,000 a year for education, you need to make sure that that educational institution can provide the intellectual and energetic space necessary to get an education. Because if it is being compromised in these ways, that is a complete waste of your money. I hate to keep bringing it back to the money.
Oh, that's important.
But one of the biggest investments by every family on the planet is the education of their children.
Yeah.
And if they can't get, whether it's the dirty electricity, because Sam Milham wrote a lot about kids getting leukemia because of the wiring at their schools. If they can't, whether it's EMF radiation, dirty electricity, or mind control, if they can't get energetically and intellectually a space conducive to education,
Shouldn't be there.
they shouldn't be there. And you as a parent, a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, the adults are responsible to make sure that the kids have an intellectually and energetically healthy, safe space.
And I think most of the motivations of people in EMF Warriors is because of their kids.
Right.
They really want a better future
Right.
for what's rolling out.
Right.
So I just want to finish with one last piece of bad news. I know we're going to do a little bit of good news. We're running over time, but I think it's important. This is a really important show. California, the state of California,
This is very bad news.
has just passed a state bill that's going to override all local authority, whether it be a county or a city within that state, where they cannot oppose the installation of these new 5G cell towers and related technology. Now, I didn't think that was possible. That if there's one person there to champion your cause is your local mayor in Australia or your local council.
Right.
And now they can't do anything. They've been
Right.
legislated out of the picture. The FCC is also brought out new legislation
Well, let me
nationally.
point out that they have not litigated that up to the Supreme Court.
Okay.
I think if you litigate that up to the Supreme Court, there's no way it stands. There's no way you get that through all the different appeals courts and it stands if people understand what this is really about. So
there's the challenge to any
that's
lawyers
the
listening.
challenge. That's the challenge. Can we get, every time we have seen the citizen or the consumer understand the risk, this kind of silly business gets backed up. So it got backed up on the swine flu vaccine. It got backed up on
GMOs.
The consumer is rolling GMOs. It's just rolling GMOs. It's getting backed up on homeschooling. Homeschooling is where Mr. Global lost completely, hands down, in the United States. But it comes from having a knowledgeable consumer, particularly a knowledgeable mother.
And that's what EMF Warriors is targeting.
Right.
Okay, so what can we do? We have many articles, blogs, interviews, papers on our library. I give nearly a talk a week on things we can do. I wrote a book called In the Dark on all the things we can do at a
Right.
local level. So we don't need to go through that now. But some of the things I think we need to think about, and I love the way you talk about it, it's called going mechanical.
Right.
So the money, when you had a look at the money, you felt that the growth for any company is in the sale of the devices rather than streaming the internet, because that will probably get cheaper and cheaper as free Wi-Fi gets rolled out throughout the world.
Right, it's on the devices, but it's also in harvesting the intelligence you get through the devices. That's the surveillance capitalism.
Okay, so if the devices are the key here, let's stop buying them.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
No more devices that have antennas or...
Old-timey devices.
Yeah, and you've actually done this in your home.
Yeah.
So you've gone pretty much mechanical for
Yeah.
all your appliances.
I've tried to be pretty much
And that's nearly
mechanical.
impossible these days, so you've done
Not
remarkably
in
well.
Hickory Valley, Tennessee. It's very possible. In fact, we have a wonderful, very talented guy who makes a market in used appliances, and he can fix anything, and he's really good, and he's always a delight to be around. So, and the reality is, he's adamant. It's much easier for him to fix a mechanical and much cheaper. So, you're crazy to get all that stuff. It's a waste of your money to buy it. It's a waste of your money to try and maintain it.
Yeah, and you're into high productivity, efficiency, and these mechanical, whether it's a washing machine, whatever device it is, they're all fine. They work just as efficient as the digital ones.
Right.
They're cheaper, they last longer, they're easy to repair, and they're not going to poison you.
Right, exactly.
Well, it's a no-brainer.
Right.
So we can start there. We've talked about Supreme Court challenges for the lawyers and activists out there who want to take that up in the States. What other measures do you think we can do, maybe from a money point of view, like where we spend our money is really important? Any recommendations you can give us on what we can do with our finances or other things?
Let me start one thing, because I'm a tither. I like taking a certain portion of my money. If you come into Solari every week or so, you'll see it's like this week's crowdfund.
Yeah, the donations.
And I'm a great believer of, there are a couple whistleblowers who are doing incredible things in this area. Bill Binney, who was an NSA whistleblower, Tom Drake, an NSA whistleblower. Binney has another colleague, Kirk Webby.
And these are all on a website called Bigger Than Snowden.
Bigger Than Snowden. Some of them aren't Bigger Than Snowden. Is Binney? I'm not sure.
Binney's on there, yeah, he is.
Yeah. And, most of these folks take donations. And it's amazing how a little bit of money can go a long way supporting them. And they have stood up. I'm amazed that Binney and Drake are alive and kicking, but they've done an extraordinary job. So I think identify the people who are leading this area, donate, support. And a lot of people tell me, I have no money. Wrong. The people who do have money watch the people who don't have money. If 5,000 people will give $1, the people who have real money say they have real support. So $1 is a very powerful energetic signal. So don't underestimate the power of that kind of support. So that's number one. Number two, this stuff continues because it continues to be, the people who do it continue to be socially acceptable when they do it. And we have the power, the greatest power we have as humans is to shun someone. And the minute we start to shun the people who are doing this or tolerating it, it could make an extraordinary difference. And that includes with your purchases, with your investments, everything else. But it certainly means, if I'm at a cocktail party, if I'm in a dinner party and I turn and I look and it's Lloyd Blankfein, I'm going to say, excuse me, I won't eat with you. And I'm going to get up and leave. They need to hear that kind of, and so we have to withdraw social acceptability from this. And that means anything you can do to educate people around you, not to entertain them with the nature of the corruption, but simply to help them reduce the risk of, to their health and their family and their finances of this stuff.
And what's a technique you would use to approach someone you love or a close friend who just doesn't understand or doesn't really want to understand, and you're seeing them...
I'm going to embarrass you, but I give them your book.
Well, that's very nice of you. Some of the things that I do, when I see a mother breastfeeding her child with the mobile phone or cell phone literally on top of this baby's head,
Right.
I really struggle. So one clever thing that Scott has done, a co-founder of and fellow host of EMF Warriors, he wraps an EMF Warriors sticker in a dollar bill and wraps it right up nice and tight, puts a little ribbon or a rubber band on it, and gives it to people.
That's a great idea.
And they open the dollar band and they go, oh, what's this? EMF Warriors. And that's the entree. Well, we just, and he starts off talking about what he's doing and why we're doing it, and it gets their attention. So there's little tricks that we're going to be developing at EMF Warriors where we can help people approach their loved ones, their friends, and we're developing all the evidence.
Right.
Like the unsung heroes of this tragedy is
Right.
anyone who has electrosensitivity.
Right.
And there's thousands of them.
Right.
Now, all the authorities are saying it's nocebo. It's all in their head. They're all crazy. What are you to say to someone who thinks that?
I never worry about that because I have been able to document such extraordinary financial fraud by the U.S. government. And I was a Senate-approved government official and a partner in a Wall Street firm. So, I have no problem citing chapter and verse, not just for, whether I give them your book or I point them to one of the audio seminars or one of the Solari reports on it. So there's plenty of evidence, but I guess my ability to document the U.S. government acting against the best interests of the general population, it's so documented and known. I think it's much harder here because the U.S. government has such an outstanding record of acting against the interests of its own citizens, whereas I don't think the Australian government can touch it on that score. So I think you have a much bigger challenge here than we do. Your guys are much sneakier on this issue than ours.
Yeah. We need to wrap it up because we've gone over time. Before we go, is there any last words of wisdom you'd like to share with the audience?
Yes, which is don't ever let yourself get overwhelmed. All solutions start with each one of us changing actions in our daily life which reduces our risk or improves our situation. So I'm always telling people, put your oxygen mask on first. But we put our oxygen mask on first so we can turn around and help the next one, usually the young people, to put their oxygen masks on. And don't worry that you can't, this is very much, I always encourage the Solari Report subscribers to turtle. Don't worry that it's big. Don't worry that you can't change the whole world. You just turtle forth and improve your situation. You put on your oxygen mask, you help the others around you put on your oxygen mask, and it's going to be those things which spread virally as we all turtle through our daily lives that are going to make the difference. And it is so very important for the other team to make us feel it's too big, they're too powerful, it's overwhelming. You need to just suspend judgment and ignore that completely because it's not true. They are few, we are many. It's what the English poet said. And we have incredible power. They wouldn't be as afraid of us as they are. So having been in the inner sanctum, I can tell you that we have power and we need to ignore the fact that they're powerful and have a lot of money and it's hopeless and turtle forth.
Fantastic. And if anyone wants to subscribe to the Solari Report?
Solari.com. We're there. We're available.
And I can't speak more highly enough about Solari.com. It's a fantastic service. And thank you again, Catherine. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Oh, no, you're welcome. Okay, that's it. Till next time. See you later.
Thank you for being part of the EMF Warriors community. We look forward to bringing you our next episode. Be certain to join in discussions on our EMF Warriors closed Facebook group. And make sure you subscribe to our fortnightly newsletter to stay up to date with global developments. If you would like to learn more about us, go to emfwarriors.com, where we have curated an amazing library of free information, resources, and solutions to your most pressing EMF concerns and needs. Because together, we can make a real difference. The materials and content discussed within this podcast are the opinions of host Jason Borden-Smith and Scott Compton and guest interviews. This information is intended as general information only for listeners of this podcast. Listeners should always seek professional advice, and the content and opinions expressed in this podcast should never be construed as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. EMF Warriors.